Good afternoon, and thanks very much for inviting me. I get to introduce to you one of my heroes, John Burris. If you look at John Burris's webpage, you'll see that it starts with, "This is America. You deserve justice." And so, you picked the right person to come and talk to you today, because he has represented some very important people that we've all heard about, and he actually has some history in our county that I feel very, very fortunate and proud to have been a small part of. You may remember back in the early 90s, we were trying to get a civilian review board for the police department. We had a very different kind of law enforcement world in Santa Cruz County. It's much improved, I have to say. But back then, it was real important to a number of us that we get some sort of civilian review. And during that, I got a call one day from a fellow that said, "Hey, I've got the Rodney King tape for Santa Cruz County." And I knew this guy, I know that he got read. Well, bring it by. So we brought the tape over, and it showed a sheriff deputy beating on a man with his baton. And meanwhile, the man's wife was videotaping this, and the three little kids, and this man's mother were screaming, "Stop, stop, stop." And this guy whacked him several times. You could hear the blows of his baton on his elbow and on his leg. And I said, "Well, this is remarkable. I mean, what the heck is this?" And he says, "Well, I just was able to get this from the district attorney's office. This happened months ago, and the DA was refusing to turn this over." So when we were trying to get a civilian review board, we keep saying to people, who's policing the police? And they'd always say, "Well, the DA's office." Well, the DA didn't want anybody to see this video, but it was finally turned over. So he shows this to me. I said, "Well, listen, is it okay for our group to show this, to show what actually is going on with the DA's office when there's this kind of a problem?" He says, "Well, I'll find out." So the next day he calls me and says, "Yes," they say, "go ahead and show it." So I invited KSBW to come to my office, and I had one of those little cheap televisions with a VCR attached. And I put it on, and they were shocked. So they recorded it, shooting off of my little TV screen, this remarkable scene. That night it went national news. It was shown over and over and over again, because it is really, really shocking. The next day I get a call from George Nichols, the victim of this incident. And George goes, "Who are you? And how did you get this tape?" And George had been walking in his hometown in Arizona with a friend in a shopping center, and there was a large window in one of the department stores with all these TVs, and there he was. His friend says, "George, you're on television." So George calls up and finds out who I am and says, "I never heard from this guy, but I'm delighted." And so he flew up to Santa Cruz. And this fellow that turned over the tape was not the right guy, let's just say, to handle this case. And George said, "Look, I'm not going to use this guy. I'd like you to represent me." I said, "Look, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I've been doing this for about 10 years, but I'm not equipped to do a civil rights lawsuit like this. That's a completely different kind of office." So I said to George, "Look, I've been around long enough. I know lots of great lawyers in the Bay Area and California. Let me see if I can find somebody for you." And that's how I met John Burris. He's a tremendous, tremendous lawyer. And despite everything that was thrown up, like the grand jury being misled and saying, "Oh, there's nothing wrong here," or despite the district attorney saying, "See, I told you there's nothing wrong here," and despite the sheriff saying, this is the sheriff a long time ago, long gone, unfortunately, saying there was nothing wrong here. So John was just a tremendous, tremendous guy. So I wanted to point out, I have off of this webpage pulled a bunch of things off to talk about some of the cases. There's a tremendous list of big cases he's been involved with and awards he's received, and I invite you to look at his webpage to see that stuff. But when Bob asked me to introduce him, he said, "Yeah, take 2 or 3 minutes." He said, criminal defense lawyer, 2 or 3 minutes, and clear my throat. So I'm going to be very brief here in describing these awards. The National Bar Association Hall of Fame inductee, 2017. The Global Directory of Who's Who Top Lawyers Lifetime Member in recognition of hard work, dedication, and contributions to the legal profession, 2016. The National Academy of Personal Injury Attorneys, 2015 Nationally Ranked Top 10 Attorney Award. The National Lawyers Guild, San Francisco Chapter's Champion of Justice Award. Wow. The National Bar Association C. Francis Stratford Award, the highest award given by the association for inspiration and contribution to the legal profession. 2 more. Top 100 Influential Lawyers in California by the California Daily Journal. And the 2003 Peace and Justice Award from California State University Center for African Peace and Conflict Resolution in 2003. John has appeared on, this is the California Lawyer. It is the most important, I guess, magazine in California among lawyers. And as the title is Burris's Beat, Taking on the Cops. So John has not only taken on police, but he's taken on the fight for all sorts of discrimination and bias. He is fearless. And we are so lucky to have him among us in the fights that we're all involved with. And I think he's the absolutely appropriate individual to come speak to you today. So please welcome John Burris.
Ben and I were way back. I think that at one point in time we both proteges of a defense lawyer in Oakland, Clinton Weiss, who was at that time the premier criminal defense lawyer. And he and I became friends out of that, and he just brought back a memory of that George Nichols case, which was a very important case at the time. Of course, and it's one of the few cases in the early days where there was a video camera. And videos have changed the landscape of policing, more so than one would have imagined when I first started out in this business. Because now, there's several different eyes on most cases. And believe me, the issues that have developed on the new legislation that's come out that has created accountability as it relates to police officers and disclosure of reports, the cell phone requirements that will take place. None of this would have happened. None of it would have happened had it not been for the early exposés of video cameras to really bring home what police officers do in many communities. And so, having been involved in the Rodney King case, that certainly was an eye-opener for everyone in terms of throughout the nation. And it was an important case, and even that case, as we were going through it, there was a lot of resistance to believing. It was like, what do you want to believe? Your lying eyes or what the police were telling you? And we had to fight that. But not much happened after that. Really, the groundswell in terms of impetus for change occurred after the Oscar Grant case. And the Oscar Grant case, as you know, turned into a movie, Moveville Station. But it gave legs, if you will, to the whole notion of not only cell phones and what they can do, but also it caused communities to rally around and protest in ways that had not been done before. So there's been a lot of movement that has taken place, and I certainly am pleased that I've been at the forefront of a lot of the movements. Certainly in Oakland, we have the Ryder case where substantial reform has taken place. We're not finished. Although much of my life has been devoted to it, but we have work to do in other communities as well. However, that's not the reason I'm here to talk today, because when Lee approached me about this, I was somewhat reluctant because I don't think he knew it was Super Bowl Sunday. and so I said, well, okay, what are we going to talk about? And so from that developed this notion that maybe what we could talk about and formulate some interest, and I had not done this before, around my emergence as a civil rights lawyer and the impact that sports and African American athletes, those who engage in advocacy, had on me as I developed as a young man. And so I decided that that would be my thing for today. It's a new one, but it also gives you this intersection, which I think is appropriate today, Super Bowl Sunday, and the issues surrounding the impact that Kaepernick has had on it, and also shows, again, that social change can come from the advocacy of sports stars. And that's what happened to me as I was growing up. And I'll take back a little bit and start. You know, I'm a child of the 50s, and as I was growing up, I was, like most kids my age, very much into baseball. Baseball was the sport. This was way before football became a global industry, or even the NBA basketball. But baseball was. And so in my household, there was much discussion about baseball. And part of the discussion was about the Negro Leagues. Jackie Robinson had already obviously been playing, and I was starting to grow up in the Giants, not before they moved here, but when Willie Mays was in New York. And so as a kid, you know, baseball seemed to be everything. But what I didn't understand at the time, as I was watching this and hearing it from my men talking about baseball, and we developed some sense about what was the social context of baseball. I didn't know about the discrimination in baseball had been there for years and years and years, and that the Negro League had players could not play professional sports. And a true story, when I did learn this to be a fact, this was like I was 10 years old. And at the time, I was gathering baseball cards like all kids 10 years old. And I had a whole slew of them. And one of my very good friends, he and I used to trade the cards and talk about the players and all the stars of the 20s and 30s and 40s. But then the realization came to me that when all these stars had become stars, whether it was Hank Greenberg, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Ty Cobb, all of them, which I knew all of them in their records, that they all set these records when African Americans could not play. And this was very shocking to me because I grew up in Vallejo, California. We didn't have, everything was integrated from as far as I can remember. So I didn't have experience with segregation. But my parents were from the South. And they were. And they understood. And they all talked about the fact. And so I became very aware of this. But I will tell you this. I threw away every card I had. I was so furious. And I was a 10-year-old. What did I know, right? All I know is that the players that my parents, my dad particularly, and uncles were talking about was Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, Duke Bell, and, just dimes. If you come to my office, you'll see all these players on the wall, and I'll show some of them to you in a few minutes. But not yet. And that it had tremendous impact on me in terms of my early development. Now, then, in 1955 or so, Brown versus Board of Education had been decided a year before, but in 1955, the second opinion, I can't tell you that I clearly understood what it meant, but I can tell you, I saw the headlines in 1954, I knew something was important. It had that kind of impact on me. So I'm learning about the discrimination that took place in baseball. Then I'm reading and hearing about the South, certainly in 55. We had the issue around Emmett Till, and then Rosa Parks. These are things that were ugly to me as a young kid. We wanted to be taught these things in school, but I'm like watching this, what does this mean? And I didn't understand and appreciate the discrimination that was taking place in terms of the public schools and riding with buses and things of that nature. So I'm trying to process this information. And at the same time, while this is going on, I am playing ball, but I'm also watching and listening to what I can see. And during this period of time, Bill Russell was a star at USF. Some of you may know it. He was a basketball star there. And And my father, I would sit with my dad and watch these games, and he would tell me about the difficulty that these teams had in going south and playing in the south. And again, this was all troubling. None of the southern teams that you see at the Cotton Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, and all of those bowls at that time did not allow black players to play. And during that period of time, Jim Brown, who was then a star, had been a star at Syracuse University, could not go to one of these bowls. And then later, it became clear that what we were dealing with then was a form of discrimination. And so I continued to watch this movement of things, and as I was growing up, impacting and, not necessarily looking at this from a career choice. I was just seeing that there was some injustice that was taking place. And so I followed what was going on in the civil rights movement, certainly, from Rosa Parks on, Martin Luther King. Before the speech in '63, I had already become conscious enough to appreciate the kind of issues he was talking about. And so I was impacted by that. By then I'm reading and hearing and trying to make sense of the world as it was. But I also noted that the athletes were people who were also making statements. And I followed what they were saying during that period of time and became much more knowledgeable about the history of what was going on. In sports, as advocates, Bill Russell was a clear advocate when he was at the Boston Celtics, and so I was that. Of course, Jackie Robinson, by the time I became really of age and aware, had retired. And then by then he had become a clear civil rights advocate, involving himself with Dr. King and the civil rights marches. At a time when he was perceived as a Republican, I didn't know what that meant at the time, but he was not well received by a lot of different folks. And so I was concerned about listening to all of that. So it goes on, and when I get ultimately, Muhammad Ali then becomes an extraordinarily important person for me during the 1960s. Certainly we were everyone was following his movement as a boxer. But I think the most dramatic part is when he decided not to go to Vietnam. Yes. And that really hit home with me, because that showed me a certain form of advocacy. And I had a chance to not meeting, but he came to Oakland, and there he was. He had lost his title, and he was in Oakland, and he was talking to us about what it meant. At the time, it was hard for me to capture what a beautiful dude he was. Yeah. So he was a very handsome guy, very articulate, a lot of fun, tell a lot of jokes, quick jokes and all, but he had sacrificed, and that's a sacrifice that cost him his title. And so by then I'm sort of formulating my sense that real injustice is taking place in the world, where I fit and all of that. And 1968 was a huge, huge year. Of course, that was the year Dr. King was killed. That was the year that Robert Kennedy was killed as well. So this was an important time for me. And then we had the Olympics. And that's when Harry Edwards, who developed a friendship with, proposed the boycott of the 1968 Olympics. And he ultimately convinced John Carlos and a number of others to participate. Now, he himself was denied. I mean, he was a scholar at the time, but what he did was kind of plant the seeds for these men to participate. And that was a major, major movement, major step. It also shows the profile and courage aspect of civil rights work, because they were successful in making a statement, but they were unsuccessful in terms of what their careers ultimately landed in. Each of them were essentially placed in a position where they lost basically their careers. And so that was an important aspect, certainly for me. And then you go on a little bit further, because in the 1960s, 1968, the Black Panthers started in Oakland. Although I wasn't a member of the Panthers, but I was a person at the time who was watching and listening to not only Dr. King before 1968, before he passed, but Stokely Carmichael, and Intrap Brown, figures that you would know, all had a message that resonated with me in one way or the other, and it formulated my sense of where I was going to wind up being. And so, I will say that, and then later, another startling moment was Kurt Flood. Kurt Flood, he's from Oakland, you know, and he was with the St. Louis Cardinals. And there were a couple of good books that were written about the 1964 Cardinals. And he himself decided that he was not, quote, be a slave to the restrictive contracts that they had in existence. And so for me, that was a significant statement of protest. But again, he lost. And he essentially was ostracized from baseball after that. He never was able to regain his career. But his courage was something that I thought and remembered extraordinarily as important. And certainly had a dramatic impact on me. After that, though, I have to show you that in 1968, which is, 1972, I was in Chicago at the time, working in a law firm. And Mayor Daley, Richard Daley, was the mayor. And during that summer, there was a huge call for students to come assist because many of Ralph Metcalf, many of his associates and friends had been attacked and beaten by the police. And he was outraged by it. So I spent the summer of '72 essentially interviewing people who in fact had been beaten by the police, beaten up by the police. It was sort of my first foray and the first-hand connection with it. Before that, of course, I'd seen the civil rights movement, I'd seen the police and all of those interacting with them, with using their dogs and using police power. So I was pretty much impacted by that as well. But certainly by 1972, I was in law school. I got real experience dealing with those issues. And it resonated with me and went to the core of my being and ultimately formed the essence of my whole practice as the kind of lawyer that I have become. And that was in 1972. Since then, of course, I've gone on to practice law in this whole area. I want to go back now, though, before I take questions here and go through some of these things here. Right here is in the back side. This is, I literally was at this particular, I was at, it'll pull out from me. There we go. Yes. At this, here we have 1972, Ralph Metcalf was right here. Before that, Ralph Metcalf was one of the fastest humans in the world. He was in the 1936 Olympics and the 32 Olympics. Ran against Jesse Owens. He came in second. But here he was a congressman in 1972, and so he put together this young students, many students, and I was one of them. And we spent the summer interviewing many people who had been beat up by the police. And so, in fact, a report has been written, Misuse of Police Authority in Chicago, that you can see if you want, but it really detailed for me this real personal experience with policing, and that it resonated with me in such a way that I understood that communities are abused by the police and there was no recourse. And it sort of formulated my sense of being from then on in terms of police. But also suggested to me that you can do more than just have an individual case. That there really are opportunities to have an impact and change the particular system in place. As Ben talked about trying to put together a review board down here, well, one of my first major cases is 1979 when the boy got beaten up, not beaten up, killed by the police. He was shot a number of times. I always tell you before Oscar Grant, before some of these other cases, there was another black 14-year-old who was shot and killed. And from that, we were able to not only deal with the case, but we also, because I was hired as a private, as an independent investigator by the city. I'm sure that's what decision they thought they made, but it was one that was important. And so from that, a citizen review board was put in place and has been there for the most part ever since. And other police review boards developed as a consequence of that around the country. But I have been thinking about those issues a lot. Then, let me go back. Go to the top. So here's what I wanted to bring to your attention. I talked to you about Negro Ball. Many of you have seen, maybe seen the documentary of Ken Burns. If you did, there was one called When the Ball Was White. And it was a fabulous exhibit that he had. But when I was a kid, listening to men talk about Negro Ball, this was very, very important. The Kansas City Monarchs were the best teams of that era, along with the Homestead Race. Just so you know, that these teams played in the Major League ballparks. When the Major League teams left on the way, then the black ball players would come in and play. And this was a period of time from the 20s, 30s, and into the 40s. It only stopped after Jackie Robinson integrated baseball. It continued on for another 15 years, but ultimately it terminated. But these were the heroes of the African American communities who were in that day. So here's one that all of you may like. Okay, this is a picture of Willie Mays with the Chattanooga Choo-Choos when he was like 17 years old. You know, this is him right here. He later went on to play with the Birmingham Barons, but this is how he was. He was a kid. Hank Aaron played on another team right after that, the Birmingham team as well. But this is, and this had a cultural component to it because this was the entertainment of the black community. This is where they went for entertainment. Black ball was everything. And many of these players played against the white players in the off-season. And they would report, these black guys could play. But the Major League owner, for whatever reason, did not allow them to play. Now here's some of the stars, you know, that when I was a kid I'd hear about. Of course, the most famous is Satchel Paige. You know, he's the most famous pitcher of his day. And the second most famous guy was, what's that name again? Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson was the home run hitter. He was reported to be the black Babe Ruth of his day. He and Satchel really thought that they should have been brought to the majors before Jackie Robinson. They were older and better players by all accounts, but they were both passed over. Ultimately, Josh Gibson died shortly thereafter, after Jackie Robinson was promoted to the major. Satchel Paige ultimately came up, but he was well into his 40s. He was the Rookie of the Year. He played for the Cleveland Indians at the time. So, again, these were things that I would hear as a kid. Not in 48, but, you know, I heard about them as players. This is an important concept here. This is 1936, of course, and by the time I was a kid, I knew about Jesse Owens, of course. Many of you may have known about him as well. And on the platform here with me is Ralph Metcalf, who was later talking to the congressman. And this is Ralph Metcalf up here. He was fast as well. And they were the two fastest humans. Although there was a guy who reported me, I can't think of his name now, was faster than both of them, but he pulled a hamstring before trials and didn't make the team. This person here is Matt Robinson, Jackie Robinson's older brother. And you can see, and he was really fast too. He was he was in the Olympics, 36 Olympics, and unfortunately for him, he was not well received when he came back. And so none of these guys were able to, not to say none, Ralph Metcalf actually was able to do well. Jesse Owens had a hard time trying to make a living after the Olympics. There wasn't a lot of people for him. And I think what's important here is that he really felt that he had been not received his proper accolades for what he had done in the Olympics and standing up to Hitler. Yeah. Now this is a famous pose here that if you come to my house, I would say to you, I have this picture of my house. And I say, can you tell me who the people who, if you like baseball, and a lot of guys my age, they know baseball. I say, okay, well let me see if you can identify the people in this picture. This is an All-Star game in 1953 in Chicago. And of course, you see it's a Negro all-star game. All the players people are black there. And there's Jackie Robinson, age 16. And then on the other side of Cleveland is Larry Doby. These were people who were very important at the time, but the person that very few people ever guessed, except a few that I've met down the years, could guess who this young person is there. That's a challenge for most. And that is a young, from Chicago, and you know Ernie Banks, right? And that's Ernie Banks as a young kid before he came up to the majors. He had a illustrious career with Don. And, now, by this time, I really didn't know all that was happening in the world around discrimination and why we have this thing that's taking place. This is something that, as a kid, in our household, Joe Louis was everything. Joe Louis, I'm still a real kid, and he's not really playing boxing anymore. But in our household and in the black community, Joe Louis was still the preeminent person in sports. In the early 50s, he certainly was not boxing competitively in a way, but he was a person that everyone talked about, certainly in the 40s and 50s, and my parents, certainly, and relatives all talked about him. Certainly the fight with Max Knowing is one that is folklore. Yeah. This is Paul Robeson. And Paul Robeson to me was an important person. Even as a young man growing up, certainly by the time I became of age of reason, because Paul Robeson had been a great athlete. He's one of the first African-American All-Americans in Princeton. And he then went to law school at Columbia, but he couldn't get a job of any significance after that. But he had this great talent, of course, as a singer and entertainer. He went out and did that for many years. But he still was a very significant advocate for civil rights. There were a lot of issues around communism and where he went and stuff of this nature, but to me, he was a real upfront person that in our household he was talked about and revered. So in the 50s, I remember him as being an outspoken leader of civil rights, and it impacted me in terms of my sense of what civil rights was. Here I have, this is more Bill Russell. Bill Russell, this is more contemporary, but Bill Russell, as you may not know, is from Oakland. And from Clemens High School in Oakland. Here he's at the last All-Star game with Korean Bar and Grant Hill. But he was one of the few early spokespersons, and certainly I followed his career when he was there because he was an outspoken person. Bill Russell didn't take any mess from anybody. He let you know what his thinking was at all times. And there is a comment I think I have here somewhere that kind of illustrates that. Bill Russell was not a guy that so I'll get back to that. What do I have next there? Here it is. Okay, these are pictures of Jackie Robinson as a player and as an advocate. He was a fierce dude. This is a guy who had to be quiet for a year. Grant Quigley had made him promise to do that, and he did. But after that year was up, his anger, his sense of who he was as a respected person surfaced. And in fact, this is 100-year anniversary of his birthday. Yesterday, 2 days ago. His wife, Rachel, was still living. But when we were kids, I believe Jackie Robinson was the king of it all for the black community. And certainly when I became of age, he was actually retiring and the Dodgers and the Giants, the Dodgers and the Yankees were always in the World Series during that period of time, and it was quite a deal. And here he's with Martin Luther King. Jackie Robinson became a real advocate, civil rights advocate after he left. He did one thing that had a very negative impact. I don't think I knew of it at the time, but I did learn of it. And that is he testified on for the Committee on House Un-American Activities. And he testified against Paul Robeson. And I remember, that my dad was very unhappy about it. Jackie Robinson was probably, in his long career, probably would say that it was the worst decision he ever made. But it was very hurtful to the African American community at the time because he was such a guy, and there he was testifying against another guy who was also revered by individuals, and he himself had suffered one of the all-time great photos. This one here. This is Jackie Robinson sitting home. And Yogi Berra is dead, so he's dead now. He lived the rest of his life saying that Jackie Robinson was out. So it's a great sense of history. But and this was at that time when the Dodgers had essentially, a significant black number of athletes, and the Yankees did not. And because most of the Major League Baseball teams did not integrate for many years. I think the last one to do so was the Boston Red Sox, which Ponce Green, who was from Richmond. And I had a chance to meet him and work with him on some matters, and he would talk about the challenge that he was presented when he went to the Boston Red Sox. But for me, back in the time when the Dodgers, not the Dodgers, when the Red Sox didn't have black ball players, well, it was noted. And I certainly didn't root for them. I think it's only recently that I can get my mind on the Boston Red Sox because they got a lot of players, and good players too, and African American players as well, and Latin players. But back in those days, not all teams integrated easily. My wife is from Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, big town as it is, did not integrate. And the other ones, if you saw some of the Jackie Robinson movies, they were the most vitriolic in their response to Jackie coming into the major leagues. So, and this was kind of a merger, if you take the context of what was going on at that point in time. I was still 10 years old, but I was seeing these different aspects, and they're starting to affect my thinking. Now, this is a period of time when I'm really starting to get hold of things in terms of my clear thinking. You have Martin Luther King, you have Muhammad Ali, you have Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, and you can see Muhammad Ali was just a joy, just a personality. But these are serious times because he is being connected with two of the greatest men of that generation. You can deal with philosophy, you can tell who you might like, who you didn't like, but these men had followers. And I was a kid, I didn't follow them, I just admired them all. If they had something to say, I'm processing what was being said. And in fact, I have a picture in my office now with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. A mirrored picture, and you have one eye for both, and it's basically seeing two guys that's looking out of a lens, and they see things differently in one side, or they see things the same through one eye. So this is an important period of time. Of course, this is, everyone remembers this. This is go back. The iconic picture here of Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston. This was, I listened to this fight, it was like shocking. But by then, Muhammad Ali had become, the preeminent person. I always thought Sonny Liston do this fight, okay? He went down much too quickly and too softly, but for history, this is the picture you get of Muhammad Ali sort of talking at the time. Now, this picture here was a significant picture and coming together, because these were people who all came together, the top athletes of their day. And I remember this very clearly, this meeting where in 1967, where you have Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, who knew at the time was an outstanding running back, We had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who then was known as Lou Alcindor. He just, we had Carl Stokes, who was a representative who later became the mayor of Cleveland. You had Bobby Mitchell, who was the star running back at the time. John, who became a leader, a real leader in sports management. And then you had Davis, who was a Green Bay Packers linebacker. Yeah. But these were tough guys, and for them to gather, and it really was one of the first times that people of this prominence would kind of stick their necks out. Now, they were all top athletes in their own areas, and they carried a lot of respect. And so I clearly noted this at the time, and tried to figure out what this really meant, but certainly it impacted my sort of thinking about what athletes can do, and their advocacy and for a cause. That's pretty much what we see from time to time. Of course, this is the iconic picture of John Carlos and Thomas Smith. In 1968, I had run some tracks during that period of time. Now, I was like a buddy compared to these guys, man. John Carlos and Thomas Smith were at San Jose State called Speed 60. And Ronnie Ray Smith, they were the fastest guys in the world. Their teams were amazing in 1968. I'll tell you another person who was an amazing track person in 1968. He was like fast. And that was O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson was at USC. He was as fast as any one of these guys, not as fast, but clearly fast. But this was another statement. Harry Edwards had put this together in terms of helping them understand and appreciate the power that they had. And certainly I remember it very well. Again, it impacted me in such a way so that sports, you can't change things through sports. You can have a particular impact. However, it takes courage. And that courage, obviously, could cost. It could cost you your careers. Often, and by then I was familiar with John Kennedy's profile of courage, so I understood you could lose. This is one I mentioned to you earlier. This was, to me, one of the most significant athletes of his day, and that's Curt Flood. Because Curt Flood had been a star center fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals. And they had won the championship in 1964 and in 1968, the World Series, I should say. And he was one of the leaders on that team. And he said, he got traded to the Philadelphia Phillies. He basically, I'm not going. And so, again, it's an example of what an athlete can do, because even though he lost, what happened is it became the forerunner of the doing away with the reserve clause that folks had. That from this case, even though he lost, from there, Major League Baseball decided they had to enter into negotiations with the athletes, because this is why you had a steady movement. I think Andy Messerschmidt was the first to get a big contract related to this. But it came about. This is one of the real giants of social activism. I don't know if he's ever gotten the kind of credit that he deserves, but he deserves a lot. Unfortunately for him, he never really got to play baseball much after that. He just played for the Washington Senators, but by then he had been out of baseball 2 or 3 years, and so his career was basically over. We have a field in Oakland named after him, but I view him as one of the really great men in terms of moving the social justice agenda. I talked about this earlier. This is a signature point moment for me, because this is when I sort of became clear in my thinking that I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer, and being there, and over time, of course, within a matter of years, I sort of honed in on doing police stuff. I did a lot of other civil rights stuff, but at the core of me was the issues of police misconduct. Because in my own mind, the most vulnerable person here in this whole system is an African-American male connected with the police. Because of the stereotypes that exist, they're very vulnerable. So I've taken it as my mission to represent them in all manners, and I'm happy I get to do it, and that it is sort of crystallized into my soul, if you will. So now, going forward, many years have passed since then, and I've been involved in different cases in different areas, but with athletes as well. I represent a number of athletes, not in civil rights matters, but athletes that just on a professional level are involved in different kinds of things. But I've had a chance to represent them. But I have a video that I want to play for the Kaepernick, the one I did a while ago, when Kaepernick first took his stance. I took a stance as well, and I want to play that now.
They give you a little shot, give you a little money. You better thank your living, I mean, You don't care about anybody else. You just want to be out and enjoy that stuff because you've been given an entry level is not on top. At least you're kind of in the ballgame. So there's a lot of things to fight, bring about the kind of unity that I'm talking about and the economic support that blacks need.
The NFL has said that players are encouraged but not required to stand for the anthem.
Until 2009, no NFL players stood for the national anthem. The players were moved to the field during the national anthem because it was seen as a marketing strategy to make the athletes look more patriotic.
There's substantial evidence of African American athletes being courageous, standing up for what they believe. Many will try to do protests in support of Colin Kaepernick. The more people do it, I can guarantee you that the rest of the population will take notice. You start talking about it in other communities, other than African American communities, things can get done. Thank you. One last comment. This past year, I joined with Harry Edwards and Reverend Amos Brown in talking about a boycott of the San Francisco Giants because their principal minority owner had contributed to a Republican candidate senator in Mississippi. And this is a woman who had a long history of segregation type activities, and he contributed to some other right-wing type conduct activities, organizations. And so our view was that we could no longer support the Giants, not as a major player, but I personally wasn't going to go to the games as long as that person is making those kind of contributions. And so shortly thereafter, he did make a public statement that one, he would have the money returned to him, but second, he would not solicit any type of, I should say, contribute to any type of organization of that kind in the future. A small thing, but it also shows what you can do if you put your mind to it. Now, I'll say to all of us, there's a lot to do in this world, social justice way. A lot to do. We all have to define our own way. As I say, make your own lane, find your own lane, and move in that way. There's no right way, one way to do any of this. But we all should just do the best we can to move the agenda forward to improve the quality of life for others who are probably less fortunate than we are. So that, I say thank you, and I'll be there to ask any questions you have. Okay?
Decline of black athletes in Major League Baseball. There is now, in 2019, the same percentage of black players in Major League Baseball as there was in 1956.
Well, I think that first off, there's just many more opportunities. And if you look at pro football, which is, 75% African Americans, look at all those cornerbacks, flankers, and running backs. Those have been baseball players in other generations. So I think it's a question of options, more options. And secondly, it's a question that in communities you don't have baseball teams. Like when I grew up, we had a lot of little league teams, baseball teams, all of that. And those have turned out to be pretty expensive. At least it wasn't then, but cities are not investing in them. So I don't think you have the training on the same level.
What about Major League Baseball?
Well, baseball, I know that baseball can do more, but I'm not involved in that whole area of life at all. So obviously I read that they could do more, And obviously the other advent, because you know they can do more because they've done a lot in development of players in Latin America. All of these baseball schools that they have there, training schools in Latin American countries, could be done here as well, but it has not been that kind of investment. All I can say is that it's disappointing not to see more players, African American players, but I also recognize that many of these athletes have a lot of options. So just look at what's happening right now with the player from Oklahoma, Kelly Murray. Kelly Murray is a first-round draft pick of the Oakland A's. He got some $1 million in the draft choice. But he's a quarterback at Oklahoma, and he has to decide whether he wants to be a quarterback or a baseball player. He has a baseball body. He's like 5'10", less than 200 pounds. It's hard to believe that he really wants to be a football player at his size. But on the other hand, players are, and he has options, and the money is bigger. So, although the money is bigger early, not later, because baseball players may have bigger salaries over a period of time if they can get it going. But that is an issue that I think that baseball is concerned about. And I think it's concerned about for their fan base as well, you know. Okay.
I'm wondering, I know you came down to Salinas when Frank Alvarado Jr. and a number of 7 unarmed Latino men were killed by white Salinas police.
Right.
And called for a federal investigation. I'm wondering your perspective on what happened with that and if anything came out of it.
Well,
Can you repeat the question?
Salinas. I've been in Salinas a number of times. Been several cases down there, and the federal investigation came in as well, prompted based upon my request. Well, I will say that the federal investigation came about as a consequence of the various cases that were taking place, and my view was that there's a pattern of discriminatory law enforcement here, and that the feds should take a look at it. Well, the feds Office of Community Service, I guess, OCC, I guess, the Department of Justice did come in, and they did conduct an investigation, and was writing a report and was trying to implement some of the changes when the Obama administration went out. And when the Obama administration left, they left, because that was something that Justice Sessions, the Attorney General, did not want to pursue. He was very much against having the federal government involved in monitoring and evaluating police departments on the ground. He thought that it infringed upon the freedom of police officers. So much did not go forward with that. And we're still working on a couple other cases. We've got a couple cases on appeal. But, you know, that is a very difficult community to deal with. I must tell you, I have a sense of almost an apartheid type feeling when I'm down there. And I just really feel it's a backward place that the Hispanic community is sort of under the thumb. And it's not a pleasant place to be for me. I didn't feel like I could do much there because it was kind of, there wasn't an aggressiveness about trying to do something there. People were pretty much, and I got it. One of the reasons is you have a lot of undocumented people. And I have some of those. Those are difficult for the families involved because they don't want to get exposed. So I think the community itself is pretty much laboring under this, you know, they like the way things are. And the police, you know, police are what they are. So I haven't done any more down there. And that's not to say I won't take a case on, but I have a reservation about giving a lot of time to it anymore. You know.
Thank you. My name's Linda. A DA here asked me a question because I was being tried and became a criminal, and I wasn't able to answer it. And for instance, that's when you lost your jury's confidence. And his question was simple. Am I an activist or an advocate? Now, I would like you to answer that for yourself. I need help. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say.
Well, did you answer the question?
I did. I said, could you tell me the difference? They didn't like that.
Ben, help me out with this.
Well, you want me to answer for you, John?
No, you answer for you. I'm curious what you'd say about it. You're the criminal defense lawyer, so that's why.
I am.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember the facts of the case, but I think that if a lot of people in this room were asked that question, they'd probably say, well, I am
No.
both.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I would answer it.
You're not about to do either, and you stepped in it.
Well, it's a definitional question, but the outcome is the same. I mean, you're advocating for something, and you can act for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I'm not doing criminal defense work, so, but that's an interesting question, but I would say both, you know, and why not?
Yeah.
Said both.
You said both?
I should have.
Yeah, right. Did you pick one?
I asked him, could you define the difference?
Oh, I had it.
He didn't like it.
You didn't like it. Okay. Well, I'm going to run. I'm going to try to get back and see some portion of it. You have one more question? You have a question? You might have one more question. Okay. Okay.
I had a question about, in your opinion, since Rodney King, as far as police brutality, in your opinion, has it gotten any better as far as, obviously, because of phones, we're able to see what's really going on? But do you think anything has changed since Rodney King and police brutality?
Well, I would say, you know, that's a good question, but I'm always saying, mostly I would say, in some communities, yes, in a lot of communities, no. It's a question of the political leadership of a particular community, whether or not they are prepared to hold officers accountable. Some departments are more so than not. However, in cases that I've been involved in, I try to be involved in, I can see if the leadership of the department wants to work with me, that's an indication that they want to hold the officers accountable. But if they're not, and they want to blame me, then I know it's not. So, you know, it's been a changing world, particularly with cameras. And I can tell you that a lot of things that have taken place more recently in terms of some of the public legislation that's occurred, those are sea changes. Those are real sea changes. I could not have dreamed when I started this business that we would have these accountability issues and the cell phone, the video releases. And I've been involved in some of these things. So I see changes from a legislative point of view, and I think it will take time for that to become part of the culture of the department, because the culture of the department defines how officers move in that department. And so I think those are long-term solutions, but I like to think that changes are occurring, and they have occurred in some places in a very positive way, but not completely.